Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Posnick from the YouTube API Developer Relations team, and welcome to this week's episode of YouTube Developers Live. Today's guest is Kris Schroder from Next Big Sound, and they're a pretty cool company that's using, primarily we're going to talk about your analytics API use, and really happy to have you on the show.
Great, thanks Jeff, it's awesome to be here.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to just go into a little bit of background on what Next Big Sound is all about for folks who might not be familiar already.
Sure, so I'm a member of the engineering team, and my role is focused on integrations with our customers and partners. So that's a little about myself. The company itself tracks the online activity for almost every band in the world, and then we organize that information into a centralized dashboard and provide that back to the music industry. So our customers include both labels who are very interested in developing and marketing artists, as well as individual bands and band managers who are trying to learn more about their fan base and promote themselves on social media and other networks.
Cool. And obviously YouTube is a huge part of the music ecosystem nowadays.
Absolutely.
So being able to get that type of information for YouTube playbacks,
Yeah.
I'm assuming is pretty important.
Yeah, tremendous. Really interesting in so many ways too, because it's not just an amazing way for fans to connect with artists, but also you see new acts breaking on YouTube in new ways that weren't possible before. So like getting a viral video or an internet meme, or getting discovered by making covers of their favorite acts, aspiring artists that are trying to grow a fan base and get started that way.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about who the intended audience is. If you were like a smaller act, can you still use Next Big Sound, or is it mainly for more established musical?
Yes, it's for both. So all three major record labels are our customers, but we also have thousands of what we call self-serve customers, individual acts, bands, band managers, people just getting started who want to understand, like, I need to take advantage of all these sources that are out there, and where am I and how do I compare to other acts that I might aspire to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's a bit of an overview, but it's always really nice to see live demos of what we're talking about. So before we go any further, if you want to start driving like the web interface,
That sounds great.
Show us what you're all about.
Cool. So right now we're looking at our homepage. We're a web-based app, obviously. And if I log in, this is the artist overview homepage that you're taken to. So any acts like yourself or others that you're interested in, that you want to report on, you would subscribe to and include here. But what I wanted to show you was specifically an example of YouTube data. So I'm sure we're all familiar with Psy and his story. It's amazing. But if we go in here, we have a bunch of different data. This is the artist overview page. And right now we're getting a quick look at some key metrics that I've decided that are important to me, and really the values for the past week, as well as how they've changed week over week. Right? I'm also getting information on particular tracks on the left-hand side, and then also gender and age information from different sources.
Sure.
Cool.
And just to be clear, we are not here showing any private data about Psy. The data on this particular page is publicly available data.
That's right.
About the YouTube views. But I know that there is a separate kind of like authenticated mode where you're actually using the analytics API to pull some additional data. We're not going to be able to demo that right now, but
right. So basically,
do believe me that it exists.
Great. Basically, the data that you're seeing right now is data that you could go and see yourself, and if you had a pencil and paper every day, one tracked it down. So it's all public information, and then for YouTube Analytics, that integration is just like you said, it's an authorized source, and that gives you much more granularity. But just to give you an overview of the type of information we have,
sure.
I think this will work great. If we go to the graph section, I'm looking at a graph of YouTube views for Psy for the past 90 days.
Sure.
And so it's really interesting here. There's a couple different spikes. In addition to collecting data from multiple sources, social media, etc., we also collect event data. So you can look at key points in time and compare them to, what might be driving up that spike in YouTube plays on that particular day.
That's interesting. Where do you pull that sort of information from?
All over the place. So there's different sources for music. The names are escaping me right now.
Okay.
Where you can pull concert information, appearances on charts. If we notice something shows up, so like a new video on YouTube, for instance, we'll turn that into an event ourselves.
Okay.
So really just scouring as many different possible sources as we can get our hands on.
Cool.
Twitter,
so even for the data that you might be pulling from publicly available sources, it seems like you're adding a lot of value from intelligently presenting it and making some, helping people discover some things that they might not see if they were just looking at numbers rather than.
Right.
So that's really cool.
That's the goal, yeah. And then another idea, bringing the YouTube Analytics data into Next Big Sound means that not only can you look at just the YouTube Analytics data, but compare it to the events that we find and compare it to other social media sources and whatnot.
Cool.
Yeah, so continuing with this example, so I just looked at events for this day, and it turns out the reason it spiked there was, it looks like Psy released a new video, the Gangnam Shake, on YouTube. So I think we can imagine what that is.
Yes, I don't think we can play it right now, but.
And then this huge jump, 48 million views. This is the release of his newer video for that Gentleman song, which people are wondering, can Psy do it again and have another great hit? And it looks like, at least for now, that's what's happening.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that seems really compelling. Unless there's anything else you wanted to demo.
Yeah, I just wanted to give an example of if we add on top of that, like Wikipedia page views. Now, it's not on the same scale yet, but if I just change over to a relative view of the data, you can start seeing things like, all right, well, not only did releasing that video drive people to YouTube to watch the video, but it meant people were going online and going to Wikipedia and learning about Psy. And so Wikipedia is an interesting source, complementary source, because that's where people go to learn about artists, more so than the artist's own webpage.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you want to dive into some of the technical details about how you've implemented this, and specifically how you're using the YouTube APIs to pull some of the data? So some background on how you've actually built this, if you want to get into the details.
So
like
what kind
of stack are you running on? If you want to talk about that.
Sure, definitely. So the front end is mainly PHP, Backbone.js, and then our back end is mainly a large Cassandra cluster.
Okay.
And so that's housing all of our raw data, time series data. It was the perfect database for that because it's just great for scaling and handling that large amount of data, lots of concurrent writes, that type of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. And obviously, YouTube Analytics is one of the major sources of data for people who have gone through the authorization flow and said explicitly, yes, run analytics for my channel. So how are you integrating with that? What language are you
So that's our data integrations, our data collectors and our data crawlers, they're all written in Java.
Okay.
So it's a pretty much standalone Java app that runs on a schedule. And then we're using very basic, straightforward, standard HTTP client to go ahead and create the calls to grab the data from YouTube.
Okay.
And since it's JSON, it's really easy to work with.
Okay, and you go through the standard OAuth 2 flow in advance and ask for credentials and that sort of thing.
Exactly. So we use OAuth 2. We have to redirect the user to a Google authentication page, and we save that token. And then each day as we go in, we have to go ahead and refresh those tokens.
Sure.
So there's a little bit of management of the connection of those types of things that can come up. But that's the nature of an API, so no surprises there.
Okay.
It's actually been pretty smooth integration.
Very cool. And so you're kind of running your analytics polls more or less on a regular timer. It's not like on demand when somebody loads a page that you pull the data. Okay.
Yeah, because as you can see in our interface, people are choosing different time ranges. So what we actually do is we're going to go in and we're going to get the daily values for every artist that is registered, for every channel and for every video, all of the different view metrics, engagement metrics. We don't really go into annotations or some of the things that are more, I feel like, ad focused features.
Okay.
But plays, unique plays, the geographic data and the demographic data, we all grab from there.
Okay.
And yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had any outstanding feature requests for this, but one of the things we did recently add to the Analytics API was access to monetization details. So if you do have people who have been clamoring to see, how much their ad revenue has been for certain videos, you can now start exposing that if you wanted. Just
cool.
Throwing that out there.
Cool, that's
kind of
awesome.
a plug for some new functionality that we've added to the API. I know a lot of analytics users were asking for that. So
cool. There's been a lot of excitement from the industry about this, and from our record label partners. I'll have to look into how this can come into play.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Any kind of best practices or anything that kind of you ran into that was not immediately clear that you want to share a solution to, or put me on the spot and ask me why we implemented something in a certain way? I'll obviously deflect, but
Yeah, in terms of kind of the challenges that we ran into, just the fact that we are collecting so much data on a daily granularity, we had to be mindful of how we created our queries, right? So as you use the API, you learn things like geography and daily, having the data sliced by both at the same time isn't an option, right? And certain metrics can't be queried with other metrics. So to get all of that,
that's another thing that's actually gotten better. For folks who are watching, you might have run into this before. Maybe we need to make more noise about these changes, but you can now query for minutes watched, like all the watch time data, along with the standard views and likes and all that other data. So you did used to have to do 2 separate queries. You can now do that in one. Maybe that cuts the number of queries you have to do in half.
That's going to help a lot.
Maybe. Okay,
absolutely.
Great. Well, it's a good thing you're on the show. This obviously doesn't scale super well, where we invite people on the show in order for them to learn about new API features. So follow us on Plus YouTube Dev on Google Plus, and we'll make sure to share these updates. And we actually do have RSS feeds now of our documentation whenever we release something new. So you can kind of subscribe to that and find out what's been added to our different APIs. So,
great.
Yeah.
Really cool.
So a little plug for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so managing your request volume, and I know that a lot of partners who've started working with the Analytics API kind of run into that, and I think the temptation is always, I want to request information about every single video I know about as frequently as possible. I want to get as much data as possible, and we sympathize with that, but you do kind of need to be a little less aggressive than pulling everything. And some of the things that we recommend folks do is, for instance, instead of, if you happen to manage tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of videos that you want to pull reports for, don't do it every night, but maybe do it every 3 nights and request data for the past 3 days, something like that. So you kind of lose a little bit of the real-time element, but it scales a lot better.
Yeah.
Basically. So I'm not sure if that's something that you kind of ran into. Okay.
It is. The second the second a user connects their YouTube analytics to our dashboard, they're like, great, show me all my data. Yeah. And it's like, all right, well, we have to grab a little bit of it at a time, maybe 5-day segments, and work backwards in time to get all of that data so it'll grow. But
I think you can do a pretty large date range. In your requests?
Sometimes. Some requests we can, and then other requests where we want the geographic data also, each request is technically its own single day range.
Okay.
So it ends up being an extra query just to get that one day.
Really?
So
okay. That's good feedback, though.
Us.
We'll see what we can do about that. Because I'm not really sure why we have that limitation, but maybe we could help.
Yeah. So. Besides that, the big takeaway that I would say for the API is that it is extremely straightforward and flexible. There's a lot of great data in there. Almost everything I've seen in the YouTube Analytics dashboard itself is available through this API, which is just really awesome. That's really great. And then the types of challenges I ran into, I would say, are not deal breakers or major compared to just the value that you get from the API. And generally, things just work like they should.
That's excellent feedback.
Yeah.
Hopefully our engineers who wrote the API are watching. Virtual pat on your back for that. And it's great to see these APIs used in really compelling and interesting ways.
And for me, the biggest help was the API Explorer. Was a great tool to use, and it just really clears up any mystery about what's happening when you make these queries. It's very straightforward.
Yeah, we've covered that in some previous GDL shows. I'm not sure that we have time to pull it up now, but just basically you could search for Google APIs Explorer, and it gives you that live interface where you can try out any sample queries. It's not just for the Analytics API, but for all our data APIs and pretty much all our Google APIs across the board without having to write code. So specifically, I do this all the time too. If you're running an analytics report, the tricky part is getting the report definition right. It's not necessarily writing Java code or PHP code to do it. It's like, what should my report look like? So API Explorer definitely helps with that.
Cool.
Yeah. Any other feedback about your experience that you want to share? I know that I don't want to take away too much. I'm deliberately not asking Kris certain things because Kris is actually going to be on stage next week at the Google I/O conference. He's going to be presenting somewhat similar material, but some new stuff too about how Next Big Sound is using the Analytics API as part of one of our sessions. So I know not everybody's going to be able to make it out to Google I/O. We're going to have a recording of his session video available, hopefully not too late after that. So, if you like what you learned on this show, I definitely recommend that folks check out the video once that's available. Once I/O actually happens, once there's a video available, Kris will be talking in even more detail.
Yeah, we have a lot of great stuff lined up for that. Some really good specific examples of real-world artists where the data has been prepared and scrubbed, because it is private data, so it's really interesting, but we have to be careful about how we show it.
Right.
So you'll have to go watch the Google I/O session to see it.
Absolutely. Well, great. So yeah, we are going to be at Google I/O next week. So there won't be a show at our regularly scheduled slot, but there's going to be all this great recorded Google I/O content that we're going to make available for folks to watch after the fact. And I know that the whole Google Developers Live series is going to be live at I/O for a bunch of other things. So there's going to be plenty of content for folks, even if you're not able to make it to I/O, to watch. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, this is Jeff Posnick. I'm Kris Schroder from Next Big Sound. Thanks so much for watching our show this week, and we'll talk to you soon.